Economic limits may dominate our headlines, but ecological deficits will dominate our future. Quote Lester Brown, World Watch Institute. In 1972, the Ocean Commission commented, corresponding to a dramatic 25% reduction in the area of ice cover discovered in that year. Quote, the circumpolar ice edge retreated several degrees of latitude between 1954 and 1972 and probably has significant consequences for biological productivity of the Southern Ocean. This major regional climatic change, perhaps, is signaling a greater one, and a global one. In the industrial age, we came to expect economic growth as a given. Progress meant ever-expanding production and consumption, but mounting evidence suggests that such expectations may not be fulfilled in the future. Quote, Charles Johnston, M.D., quoted in the summer of '92. Present-day economics must take a holistic approach to the environmental dilemma taking place. In a world of specialization, our problem-solving capacity is diminished as a result of issues being seen in isolation. We require new directions to understand the psychology of economics and human need. The techno-economy that replaces most human values becomes the measure of achievement and a better life. The result is that it is threatening human life on Earth. We cannot have economic production without pollution. A redirection of the economy is now necessary, examining green issues as part of the global discussion about the environment. Presently, the Western nations' business-as-usual attitude masks the true nature of the environmental threat to global security. Quote, William Nordhaus, the father of economics at Yale University. Current theory of economics. The current theory of economics has capital divided in only three parts: land, labor, manufactured capital, and also determine profitability in a closed system. This narrow theory of three parts limits our view of concepts valuable to current society and fails to address those aspects of the system that determine global sustainability, that include the human factors of quality of life. If we are to achieve equity, we must look beyond the current structure of our economics to include both material and human capital. Human capital expands beyond simple labor to include motivation, health, knowledge, and skills. The new human theory of economics. This new theory of economics has capital divided into 5 parts: environmental, human, social and organizational capital, manufactured capital, credit capital. These 5 parts form the basis for a new assessment of the gross domestic product, GDP, and the gross national product, GNP, that would be the measure for determining profitability of economic activity. This new economic theory focuses on the socio-economic issues as not separate from the environmental or technological ones. The new humane economic model includes life issues such as healthcare, drug abuse, family breakdown, resulting from humanity being out of sync with technological change. Quality of life issues can open areas of economic activity previously closed. How might it work if the West built its industrial base with conservative ethic principles and export of low and intermediate technologies that serve developing nations? In this model, the product would be durable, avoid obsolescence in design, and be easily repaired with available spare parts. How are we to deal with an entrenched global economy that supports the continuation of pollution and atmospheric loading of greenhouse gases? We talk wistfully about limits for growth while we watch the unrestricted withdrawal of resources for the manufacture of optional consumer goods to support unsustainable lifestyles. For example, the fashion industry is completely out of sync with our need for survival. The good life must give way to the conserver life. We have been seduced into believing the promise of a life of ease if we continue to consume at ever greater levels. The development of optional and disposable goods fuels modern Western global economies. Human production is in conflict with survival as we spend the resource base of present and future generations on these optional goods. The West's icon of progress, the automobile, is one of the basic supports of the Western economy. The automobile industry is a major contributor to global pollution, however, is central to the functioning of the free market system. There are many people employed by the automobile, trucking, oil, and related industries. Changes to these industries would redefine Western culture. Few people have the political will to initiate the fundamental changes necessary in this industry because of the magnitude, complexity, and difficulty of the problem. One of the answers to deal with this issue is non-polluting technology. Why? The non-polluting hydrogen fuel cell has been with us for almost 100 years. Its use was repressed by the automobile industry. The car accounts for 17 to 20% of all the estimated CO2 released into the atmosphere. In 1 year, the average car gives off its own weight in carbon. It contributes to the ozone hole with its air conditioning, to the garbage crisis with planned obsolescence, and contributes to acid rain with the release of nitrous oxides. The numbers of cars in service has increased from 50 million in 1950 to more than 500 million today. How will the burgeoning industries of both India and China affect this final figure in release of carbon emissions? If, as expected, China and India join the Western model of auto-centered transportation, the amount of greenhouse gases going into the atmosphere will no doubt remove any hope of instituting sufficient changes to forestall the looming environmental crisis of irreversible global warming. Both India and China have formulated policies to follow the Western model of auto-based transport. This was the projection 9 years ago. It is now a fact despite the shrinking global economy. 7 days of commuter traffic in New York burns more energy than Africa uses in a year. If we are to survive, it is necessary to retool to the production of non-polluting vehicles. We must act decisively to save ourselves. The World Bank and International Monetary Fund, IMF, employ lending practices that further impoverish developing nations. Globalization of the world's economy is a grand plan if practiced with an even-handed approach. The consumer-driven global market economy jeopardizes survival of the world's population by introducing a consumer ethic already unsustainable in the West. The boom and bust cycles of economic activity are the result of concepts of progress dependent upon unlimited growth, clearly unsustainable in any sense. This way of life, one which rationalizes unrestricted and unlimited growth, benefits approximately 20% of the population of the now G20 Western world countries. They extract 81% of the world's resources to fuel their economies. Western economic practices are responsible for a large segment of the southern hemispheric poverty. We can share the world's resources equitably, or live as we've been doing until collapse occurs. If the West's use of resource becomes the global model, environmental problems will increase beyond our ability to deal with them, regardless of the technological innovation we bring to bear. For example, the Green Revolution, put in place before 1985, was supposed to feed the world. However, the reality is the technology developed just postponed global famine. Developing countries. The World Bank or IMF loans to the developing countries rarely reach the people for whom they were intended. Large bureaucracies do not respond to individual need. If the goal is truly to help developing nations, we must supply resources directly to individuals, as with micro-enterprise loans pioneered by Muhammad Yunus of the Grameen Bank in Bangladesh. Indebtedness is the result of global exchange between rich and poor nations. Currently, one half of every dollar produced by emerging nations goes to pay past debt. Other more creative means of borrowing, using a variety of new, non-usurious economic systems, could better serve developing nations. A Swedish model is a good illustration of zero-interest concepts that are non-expansionary, non-usurious, and ultimately sustainable. JAK is a non-profit association in Sweden. Bigger is not necessarily better. We must allow a respite from unlimited growth for the development of sustainable systems. Unlike the economists who believe in perpetual motion and unhindered expansion, the proponents of the new five-part economic system believe there must be a limit to growth. The Club of Rome. We have arrived. The Club of Rome findings from Limits to Growth, 1972. 1. If present growth trends in the world population, industrialization, pollution, food production, and resource depletion continue unchanged, the limits to growth on this planet will be reached sometime within the next 100 years. The most probable result will be a sudden and uncontrollable decline in both population and industrial capacity. Club of Rome findings from Limits to Growth, 1972. 2. It is possible to alter these growth trends and to establish a condition of ecological and economic stability that is sustainable far into the future. The state of global equilibrium could be designed so that the basic material needs of each person on the earth are satisfied, and each person has an equal opportunity to realize his or her individual human potential. Club of Rome findings from Limits to Growth 1972. 3. If the world's people decide to strive for this second outcome rather than the first, the sooner they begin working to attain it, the greater will be their chance of success. Meadows et al. 1972. The published results were attacked as expected by the right and the left, but particularly by mainstream business and economic sectors who require business as usual. In an upgraded version of Club of Rome findings called Global 3 1992, I quote, in 1992, on the 20th anniversary of the publishing of Limits to Growth, the authors re-examined their findings and published their new results as Global 3, appearing below in the final paragraphs of this book. The conclusion drawn by the authors and their colleagues after lengthy analysis was that many of the Earth's systems had gone beyond the limits of sustainability since their work in 1972 was published. While there is a new awareness of the gravity of our predicament, change has remained slow, and in 10 years that have elapsed since Global 3 was published, our situation worsens. The love of country has succeeded at bridging people at the national level. The great new historical challenge is the development of love amongst all the Earth's inhabitants and for the Earth itself. In a letter from Sigmund Freud to Albert Einstein. The conclusion of this first part presentation on the economy is the following. The humanistic and holistic five-part economic system outlined above is necessary for our survival. The question is it possible to attain a new maturity in global economics? If our leadership can redefine economics to include the full spectrum of human potential as its operative fulcrum, we have obtained our goal. This definition would demand a compassionate leadership whose focus is human and which takes into consideration love of others, love for our trading partners, consideration for our environment and social fabric, culture, and a better life. These are the seeds for a new sustainable economic reality. Wealth and progress can now include health of the environment and communities, as well as growth of the full dimensionality of the human person and vitality of the workplace. This is the job for Barack Obama. This is the direction that youth must take in making the policymakers aware of the fact that they demand this issue to come to fruition.